Hello everybody, it's Alex from the New Horizons MTG channel and welcome back to another video of mine. Today I want to show you how you can play more professionally in your next game of Commander. And before we get into that, I'd like to remind you, if you enjoy this video and learn something, feel free to support me with a like, subscribe or even a channel membership or donation via Super Thanks. I appreciate all your support, but enough with the self-promotion, let's get right into the video. Today we'll play through a few turns of MTG together and I'll show and explain how I approach the game and my turn as the active player. Right away, we need to clarify what it means to be the active player. In a game of Magic the Gathering, there's an active player and a non-active player. In my opinion, it's the active player's job to guide the non-active players through the turn, while the non-active players should actively listen and wait for the active player to pass priority to them. The active player has the following tasks. They start with priority, meaning no one else can take actions until they either play a card, activate an ability, or attempt to move between phases. To move between phases, the active player must pass priority to the non-active player in turn order, stating that they want to proceed to the next phase of the turn. If no non-active player responds, priority returns to the active player and they automatically proceed to the next phase. To visualize all of this, we'll play through a few turns with my commander deck and I'll explain and demonstrate how I believe the turn sequence should be handled. To visualize all of that, I brought out my Gwenna Eyes of Gaia deck. And to quickly clarify, Gwenna is a mana dog that you can use to make mana for creature spells. And whenever you cast a creature spell with power 5 or greater, we put a 1/1 counter on it, and then we also untap it. The first few turns might be a bit boring for you, but I really want to approach this from the start. So Gwenna is in our command zone, and we will take our opening hand of 7. And let's see if we can keep this one. It's really risky, but yeah, with Utopia, yeah, we can give this a shot. So let's assume we are the active player and we start the turn. So we will be in our upkeep and we will have priority there. We will say, okay, I'd like to move to my draw step. So with that, we pass priority to our opponent, but it's turn 1. Still, to visualize this, we always have priority as the starting player. Everybody is fine with that. So we will arrive in our draw step. We will draw our card for turn. We will have priority again. We want to move to first main phase, and then we arrive in our first main phase. When it comes to priority, we always have priority as active player, and even playing a land is not being checked with priority order, so we still have priority. We will play our forest for turn, and we will float a green mana with that forest, still having priority. Activating mana abilities doesn't require to check priority with somebody else. So we will float a green mana. And what we will do now is we would like to cast Utopia Sprawl, enchanting our forest. With that cast on the stack, we still have priority because you always have priority until you pass it to somebody. So we announce, okay, we want to cast Utopia Sprawl. We want to do nothing in response to us casting Utopia Sprawl, so we will pass priority to our opponent in turn order. Everybody is fine with that. Ask all the non-active players, and then we resolve our spell. And now our forest is enchanted with Utopia Sprawl and we name green on ETB. Since that resolved and our spell resolved, we have priority again. We have nothing in our turn 1, so we pass priority through our phases and we give away the priority to a non-active player by passing the turn, making them the active player. At some point, we will, in turn order, become the active player again, so we will move to our untap and we will be immediately in our upkeep and have priority here. We will say that we want to move to our draw step, so we want to give away our priority and everybody is fine with that. So we will move to our draw step, draw our card, and then we want to move to the first main phase, giving away priority again, and priority arrives at us again in our first main phase. With that, we will decide what we want to do. We want to play another forest, and then I can move this a little bit lower. I can leave priority here. And then we will check what we can do. And in our turn 2, we would like to float a total of 3 mana and cast our commander, Gwenna. With us casting her, we still have priority, and us casting her, and we are fine if she resolves, we pass priority to somebody else. The non-active player has to check this one off, the other one too, and the other non-active player too. Everybody is fine with that, nobody wants to counter Gwenna, so priority arrives at us again and Gwenna is now resolved. With that, we have nothing else to do in our turn, so we are fine to move through phases, and us attempting to maybe move to combat, people could have priority again and could say, okay, we want to interact with Gwenna. Let's assume nobody wants to do that and priority moves around, and at some point we pass the turn to somebody else. The turn order follows, and at some point the priority will arrive at us again as being the active player. So we will untap. We are in our upkeep. Priority is checked if we can move to our draw step. Everybody is fine with that. We arrive in our draw step, draw a card, and then we want to move to main phase. Priority is checked again, and then we arrive in our main phase. Now it gets a little bit more interesting because we can do a few more things in this turn, and we still have our priority stack here. And let's assume we float 2 green mana with our Enchanted Forest, and with these 2 green mana we would like to cast our Emerald Medallion. We put Emerald Medallion on the stack, and we are fine with it resolving, so we pass priority to somebody else. Non-active player agrees, other non-active player agrees, last non-active player agrees, and so priority arrives at us again, and Emerald Medallion resolves. So now we have priority again. Nobody can do anything at the moment except us, since we are the active player. Since all of our green spells are now discounted, we can do something more. We would like to float a green mana and also use Gwenna's ability to float another 2 green mana. Since our green spells are discounted, we would like to cast a Xerac the Huntcaller. We have to check on our board if we get any triggers. And yes, we do. Since Gwenna is tapped and we cast a creature with power 5 or greater, Gwenna will trigger. So currently the stacks look like this. We have Xerac the Huntcaller on the stack, and we have a Gwenna trigger above that because Gwenna says when you cast a creature spell. We also share priority with that trigger on the stack. We are fine with letting this trigger resolve of Gwenna, so we pass priority on the trigger. Everybody else agrees, so priority arrives at us again, moving a little bit down to Xerac the Huntcaller and that trigger resolving. So Gwenna untaps, and she also gets a +1/+1 counter. Now, since Gwenna is a cast trigger, Xerac the Huntcaller is still on the stack. It didn't resolve before the trigger. It's still on the stack, and we have priority again. Now, we as active player could react again, but we are fine with Xerac the Huntcaller resolving. So we say, okay, we are fine if Xerac the Huntcaller resolves. So we move priority to the non-active player. The other player agrees. We ask the next one, and we ask the last one. Everybody agrees on that. So Xerac the Huntcaller resolves. We are still in our first main phase, and after that, with Xerac the Huntcaller on board and nobody else reacting, this is our current board state. After that, we want to move through phases and also start attacking players. So we would like to say move to combat. This immediately means that we want to move to the combat phase and automatically start things like at the beginning of combat turn triggers, which means we want to move our priority to the next phase, which is the combat phase. So we say move to combat, and with that we imply that we pass priority on us moving to the beginning of combat. Every non-active player agrees, since priority moved around to every non-active player. And with the last non-active player agreeing to us moving to combat, we immediately get a trigger from Xerac the Huntcaller, because Xerac the Huntcaller says at the beginning of combat on your turn, if creatures you control have total power 8 or greater, target creature you control gains haste until end of turn. Since everybody agreed on us moving to combat, we automatically, if the last non-active player agrees, get our Xerac the Huntcaller trigger. With that trigger on the stack, we have to announce a target for this trigger, which is Xerac the Huntcaller itself. With this trigger on the stack, we get priority again, and we agree, okay, we are fine with letting this trigger resolve. We pass priority to the non-active player. The non-active player in turn orders agree that this trigger is fine, and so this trigger resolves, giving Xerac the Huntcaller haste. We are at the beginning of combat, and now we would like to pass priority and move to the next phase, which is let's declare attackers. So we ask everybody else, move to declare attackers. So we pass priority with that, and in turn order, we ask, is everybody fine with us declaring our attackers? Everybody is fine, so we can immediately turn our creatures sideways and attack some players, whoever we want to attack. These are our attacks. We get priority again and say, okay, these are our attacks, and we don't want to do anything before we move to declare blockers. So we are fine with moving to declare blockers, asking the first non-active player in turn order, hey, can we move to declare blockers? And everybody agrees on that. Maybe they do have a response. Then this is the time when they can ask with that, when we give them priority. but everybody agrees. We move to blockers. Let's assume nobody has any blockers. And then, since blockers are declared, we as the active player have to say, fine with damage, or maybe we have a combat trick with our last green mana that we want to do before damage happens. But we are fine with damage happening, so we say, okay, pass to damage, everybody agrees, and then damage happens. We arrive in our second main phase, and since there's not much to do, we just say pass turn. We all know how it goes in a regular game of Commander. You sometimes, if you have nothing much to do, just say pass turn, so let's keep it realistic. After that, we pass the priority to another active player. They do their stuff just as we do, at least in my opinion, it should happen like that. And at some point, priority arrives at us again, and we will move to our upkeep. And in our upkeep, nobody wants to do anything. We are fine with moving to draw step. Draw step happens, we get priority again, and then we can move to first main, and then we are in first main. With that, we play a land of ours. Since we don't have much gas in hand, we would like to draw a few cards. So we float 2 green mana, and we add 2 more mana, since Emerald Medallion also discounts our spells. And we would like to cast Shamanic Revelation, and we draw a card for each creature we control, which would be 2. And we would also gain 4 life for each creature we control with power 4 or greater. Since we cast a spell, we still have priority. We could put something else on the stack. For example, like a Worldly Tutor, finding exactly the card that we need to put on top with us holding priority, and then casting Worldly Tutor, we can put it on top. Afterwards, that Shamanic Revelation resolve and immediately draw that card. But we are fine with just Shamanic Revelation resolving, so we pass priority on that, and so on and so on. And at some point, Shamanic Revelation resolves, drawing us 2 cards. Sadly, not too much gas, but something that we can use. After Shamanic Revelation resolved, we have priority again, and then we would like to do something, and we would like to float a green mana, and we would like to cast Sylvan Library, having priority again, but we are fine with Sylvan Library resolving, so we pass priority to a non-active player. They all agree, or they want to do something in response, and when priority arrives at us again, the Sylvan Library has resolved, and now it's on the battlefield. Since there's nothing else that we can do, we would just like to move to combat and pass priority on us changing phases. Everybody else agrees, and priority arrives at us again, immediately triggering Zurek the Huncaller, and we will just target himself again, and then we are sitting again here at the beginning of combat, and we would like to say after that trigger resolved, I would like to declare my attackers. Everybody is fine with that, since they get priority before we declare attackers, since there are also creatures in the game that have powerful attack triggers, and since everybody agreed, we will just swing our creatures at somebody else again. Then damage happens, we move through phases again, as explained earlier, and at some point when our opponents did their turn, I personally also don't believe that this board would have sticked around like this, but this is just for visualization. We arrive in our upkeep, and now something interesting will happen. We are in our upkeep, and then we would like to move to our draw step, and we do that, and at the beginning of our upkeep, we get a Sylvan Library trigger. We are fine with that trigger resolving, and everybody gets to pass priority on that. They could react to it, for example, flash in something like an Orcish Bowmaster or something like that. We let that trigger resolve, and on resolve of that trigger, we are allowed to decide if we want to do it or not. So we agree to draw 3 cards, and now we can look at those cards and think about what we want to keep, what we don't want to keep. Since I'm looking at my hand at the same time, we would just like to pay 4 life and take these 2 creatures. Since that, Sylvan Library has resolved, and we would like to, with us having priority again, move to our first main phase. Priority is checked, and we arrive in our first main phase. In our first main phase, we can do stuff again, and just let me do a little bit of quick math. We can play our land for turn, and with that, yeah, this works out really, really nicely. I would like to cast a Monstrous Vortex. We have priority, since we could do something in response to us casting Monstrous Vortex, but we are fine with that, so we pass priority on that. Everybody else agrees, so Monstrous Vortex resolves. Monstrous Vortex says, whenever you cast a creature spell with power 5 or greater, discover X, where X is that spell's mana value. Alright, board is getting a little bit crowded, but we also like that as mono green player. And now let's do something. We only paid 3 mana, remember we have Emerald Medallion, And then we would like to float 2 green mana with Gwenna, and we would like to add 3 additional. And so we will get to a total of 5 mana in our mana pool. With that, we would like to cast a Thundering Baloth, and we also always have to check how many triggers we get. We cast Thundering Baloth. Since it has power 5 or greater, we will get a Gwenna trigger and a Monstrous Vortex trigger. What's now really important is that sometimes people immediately start to say, yeah, I want to do something in response. You are the active player. You have to guide them through the turn and also first build your stack. Since we have 2 triggers on the stack, it is our job to first build the stack of how we want to resolve what's going on in our turn. Let's say we cast Thundering Baloth, it is on the stack, and we would like to build the stack like this. I also made these trigger tokens simply to explain how this is going to resolve. And this is currently how the stack looks. On the lowest, what will resolve last is our Thundering Baloth, then the Monstrous Vortex, and then we also still got the untap of Gwenna. Let's put it like this. This is how it looks, and this is the trigger order. And here we have priority on this trigger. As I've said earlier, people immediately start to say, yeah, I want to Swords to Plowshare something or something like that, but this is not how it works. You as the active player have to guide the non-active players through the turn. So if anybody wants to do anything, let's play this game fair and say, whoa, sorry, hold your horses. Let me first build the stack so everybody knows what's going on. We would like to resolve the Gwenna trigger first, followed by the Monstrous Vortex, and then the Thundering Baloth resolves. We have the Gwenna trigger and we still have priority. We could still do stuff here. But we are fine with that. So we pass priority on the Gwenna trigger. Everybody else says, yeah, that is not the problem. We agree on the Gwenna trigger. So Gwenna finally resolves and gets her +1/+1 counter. This trigger is resolved. Since everybody agreed on it, priority arrived at us again, and we are on the Monstrous Vortex trigger. And the Monstrous Vortex trigger cares about the mana value, so it is currently 6. And now I ask again, okay guys, I currently, since Gwenna resolved, I have priority on the Monstrous Vortex trigger. I could have baited my opponents into having nothing else, so I simply let Gwenna resolve, and now I could still do something. If I had mana, for example, I could do a Worldly Tutor. But I don't have anything, so I pass the priority on the Monstrous Vortex. Everybody else agrees of the non-active players, so this Monstrous Vortex simply resolves. Monstrous Vortex is a really cool and powerful card. So we will do the Monstrous Vortex trigger. So we reveal cards from the top of our library and until we hit a non-land card that has mana value 6 or less, and we can either cast it or take it into our hand. We hit Beast Within. Since hitting the card with Discover and deciding if we want to cast it is part of the resolution of the spell, we are sitting here, we see a Beast Within, and we say, okay, let's cast it. Simply, we cast Beast Within, targeting something from our opponent, and then priority moves up to Beast Within. We announce the target for Beast Within, and we also find passing priority on us casting Beast Within. We ask the non-active players, and everybody agrees that Beast Within is fine. We destroy a land, for example, of one of our opponents, and they get their token. At last, we get priority on our Thundering Baloth, and we are still fine. Since a lot has happened since we cast the Thundering Baloth, we could still have something. Imagine we had a land, we could have a Worldly Tutor or something else, a 1-mana spell, whatever. Somebody saw how dangerous Monstrous Vortex can be, so maybe they wanted to destroy it now since they saw what happened, but nobody has something, so we are fine with passing priority on us resolving the Thundering Baloth. Everybody else agrees of the non-active players. Remember, they could still have something as soon as priority arrives at them, but nobody has anything, so Thundering Baloth resolves. It's a 5/5 trample, and as long as I control my commander, it gets +2/+2, and other creatures I control get +2/+2 and trample, so really nice anthem effect. Since we have a powerful anthem on the board, Gwenna grew with the Thundering Baloth cast, and we also have a haste enabler with Zorak the Huntcaller on board, we are in a really fine spot. So we want to do what Mono Green wants to do, and we would like to pass priority and we would like to move to combat. So we pass priority on us moving to combat, and everybody else agrees. And since Zorak the Huntcaller is a beginning of combat trigger, it will immediately happen as soon as the last person passes on priority, and we will get our Zerg the Huntcaller trigger and announcing the target being Thundering Baloth, and we still get priority on this trigger. We say we are fine with this trigger resolving, passing priority to a non-active player or to the non-active player in turn order. They all agree, or our 3 opponents agree, and with the last player agreeing, the trigger immediately resolves. So now Thundering Baloth has haste. After that, we are fine with passing priority to move from at the beginning of combat to declaring attackers. We are fine with moving to declare attackers. We ask everybody if they are fine with that. And if they are fine with that, we can immediately declare where we want to go. Let's do a full swing at one player. And then we are still having priority after declaring that those attackers. And we can say, okay, we are fine with moving to blockers. Are you fine with moving to blockers? Yes, yes, yes. They might not have any, they might have some, but probably only jump blockers, whatever. And so we automatically declare blockers. After that, we have priority again. Yeah, I am fine with going to damage. Are you fine with damage? Yes, yes, yes. Everybody agrees and damage happens. After that, we move to our second main phase and we do rinse and repeat for the whole turn. I think that I can stop here, and I do hope that with the visualization of priority and triggers and how to work it all off, in my opinion, I could clarify a few things. And if you approach your next Commander game like this should definitely clear a few things out. And I personally think that this makes the game a lot easier. I do play at a lot of different levels of power and also skill level at some point. I also like to explain and teach a lot of players a lot of about Magic the Gathering. And I think if you discipline yourself to really work with priority and asking priority on triggers and casting spells and so on, you will become a way better player. And if you introduce priority and trigger order and so on to your playgroup, and also just as I did earlier, first telling everybody if something big happens, like casting Thundering Baloth, trigger Granite, trigger Monstrous Vortex, and then say, guys, calm down, let me first build the stick. I would like to resolve it like this, for example. This is the current order. You can also visualize that with your own cards, or you can quickly write yourself a few tokens, just as I did here for this video. It can really help with your learning curve about this game. There are a lot of rules. I don't know all of them. I am no judge, no nothing. I'm just a player who is doing content about this game. But still, if you really try to increase your skill level with this game, if you want to play more correctly, if you want to play stronger decks, if you want to play more combos and so on, then working with this with priority and trigger orders, you will become a better player, in my opinion, because I did the same thing. At some point, I was also okay, I want to destroy your stuff. And somebody said, yeah, but you don't have priority right now. And I was like, whoa, what's going on? From then on, I started to learn about these things. I started to do these things. I do think that I became a way better player with looking out for these things and approaching a game like this. And also asking myself or disciplining myself, when I am the active player, it is my task to guide the non-active players through my turn. I think that's something that makes games way easier, way more fun also, because if you're sitting there and you agree on a trigger and everybody else agrees, and that trigger triggers something else, and then you're like, oh my god, okay, I shouldn't have let that one resolve. I should have seen that it triggers this and this. You will become more experienced and learn more about the game and about synergies and stuff like that, than just saying, okay, this happens now and I get this out of it and I go infinite or something like that. This is not how you, or at least this is in my opinion, not how you will become a better player. If you would do it in a different way, like really working off the stack, you can see, okay, I can still interact with his infinite combo. I just need to wait until I reach priority and the correct trigger where I can interact with his infinite combo, for example. A lot has been said. Maybe I did a few mistakes in this video. Feel free to let me know. But I do think that I did a lot of things correct, or I did everything correct. Otherwise, I wouldn't upload it here. But feel free to let me know if you agree with stuff like, with the stuff that I did in this video. If you saw something that I maybe did wrong, I'm always open to learn. And overall, I hope that you enjoyed this video, and I hope that this video can help you to become a better player and also to look more professional in your next game of Magic the Gathering. I hope you enjoyed it, and then I would say, see you in the next one. Goodbye, guys.